Today I will show you how I painted this Lynx watercolor sketch using watercolors and some acrylic ink. So let's get started. I use this beautiful photo that I found on Unsplash. I'm using Artistico cold press paper, a handful of paints, and some liquid ink, as well as 3 brushes for this project. Now I start by wetting the entire thing. I have this sketched out in pencil right on my watercolor paper. And if you have seen my videos before, I do apologize for my voice. I am getting over a bit of a cold and I still sound kind of funny, but I really wanted to narrate this lesson, so I hope you bear with me. So I started by mixing some brown ochre with a little bit of neutral tint just to take that yellow tone down a bit. And I'm painting directly on the wet paper right over the Lynx. And I'm just dotting it around, and I'm not concerned about it going out of the edges. It's all going to blend a bit together. So for this dark, I'm using a little bit more neutral tint in that mix with the brown ochre, and even more neutral tint on these darker areas. I'm just getting a baseline of lights and darks on the cat for now, and I will come back later and refine it. I'm going to do the background using sepia and some burnt umber, and then I'm going to darken it a little bit later with some more neutral tint. And I do have ant traps set out on my desk. They have been relentless this week. I work next to a window and the ants are always trying to get in, so hopefully it'll get taken care of before the next video that I shoot. I'm just letting the background mix wet and wet with those different shades of brown. Now I'm painting inside the dark part of the ears. The water, I should say the paper is still wet on the Lynx itself, so a lot of this extra pigment that I'm putting on is still blending out wet and wet. I want to be careful to preserve as many of the white areas I can. Even though I do have some acrylic ink to use at the end, I don't want to be too reliant on that because I don't want to make the sketch look too fussy or overworked. So now I'm mixing in some burnt umber, a little more neutral tint there, and his chest is technically white, but it's pretty dark and grayish. I'm trying to use the photo just as a loose reference. I don't want to try to completely replicate it because then I know I'll get too bogged down in details. By the way, this drawing, or I should say this painting, took me about 90 minutes, maybe 80 minutes to complete from start to finish. I have it sped up, obviously, and I only cut out a few parts. So I'm going in and adding some more of those darks. Still refining the shadow and highlight areas. It's in kind of an ugly, awkward stage, but you just got to push through that and keep going and trust your reference as much as you need to. I'm wiping away a little bit of that pigment that I want to have separate between the background and the ears. Now a little bit more brown ochre. A little more umber. You can tell that the paper is starting to dry because my brush marks are not spreading as much. They're pretty much staying in place, but when I need to soften an edge, I just rinse and wipe my brush and I use that to smooth out the edges. Adding a few more sparing darks around the chest. I'm also trying not to get too carried away with individual brush strokes. I still want to leave it kind of loose and washy as much as I can. Now I'm splaying out my bristles a bit to make some more finer hair details and dipping it into that brown ochre mix, very watery. Again, I don't want this to be too dominant or too overworked, so I'm just doing it here and there for a little extra texture and depth. I'm redoing the background here. I really wanted it to be a little darker, so I'm adding neutral tint over that brown, and I mix it with a little bit of the burnt umber. And then I paint into the fur from the background to get that fur effect around the chest and the back. Now for the eyes, I use watered down brown ochre. In the photo, they're very gold with slight green, but I didn't want to add another color to my palette here, so I just decided to go with the gold, and I think it worked out pretty well in the end. Nice thick dark lips. I'm just waiting for that first layer on the eyes to dry before I go back to them. Softening those fur edges on the chin. And now I can go in and paint the pupils on the eyes and the other dark parts to really make him come alive. For the top of the eye there, I use a mix of the neutral tint with some of the burnt umber. Again, these darks are used with the neutral tint, which in full concentration can get quite dark. At this stage, it's about making some more minor adjustments, evening out some areas, adding a little bit more detail, a little bit more contrast. But it's already coming together, and painting the eyes definitely helps to make it look like an almost complete painting. Now for the ink, I'm just going to bring out some of these white areas that got a little bit covered. Could also use gouache for this, or watered down white acrylic paint. Now for those important whiskers. A little highlight on the nose by mixing the acrylic ink with a little bit of that brown. And I'm going to add a little shadow to the bottoms of these whiskers, just so they can stand out a little bit more. And a little bit more dark fur texture behind them. Going back in with my watercolors now and doing some darks, like these tufts on top of the ears, and then a few other minor areas. And going in with a few browns, a little bit more for detail. At this point, I'm not really looking at the reference photo, I'm just kind of seeing what the painting needs. By the way, I'm always looking for new ideas for painting topics. So if there's something that you're struggling with when it comes to watercolor painting, I would love to hear from you. Just leave a comment below this video and I'll be happy to answer your question. Or I'll make a video to answer your question. If this tutorial helped you, please give it a thumbs up because that really helps small channels like mine. And if you would like to see more watercolor tips and tutorials from me, then please subscribe to see a new video every week. Click on one of these videos to keep learning how to paint animals. Thanks for watching, and I will see you next time.